If you drove past it 2 years ago, you would not have looked twice. A crumbling gas station on a forgotten stretch of highway with shattered windows, faded pump signs, and weeds pushing up through the cracked concrete of the lot. The roof sagged in the middle. The doors hung loose on rusted hinges. To everyone who drove past that abandoned building, it was an eyesore waiting for a demolition crew. One man looked at that gas station and bought it for $400. He was homeless when he did it, and he did not buy it to live in. He bought it to give 30 abandoned dogs a place the rest of the world had decided they did not deserve. Today, every one of those dogs is alive because of a man who, on the day he signed for that ruin, had nothing to his own name. But getting from a $400 wreck to a working dog shelter nearly destroyed him. There was a night, about a year in, when he sat on a cold concrete floor and genuinely believed that everything he had built was going to die before sunrise. We'll come back to that night, because to understand what was at stake on the floor of that gas station, you first have to understand how a homeless man ends up owning the building at all. It starts with the gas station itself. That building had been closed for the better part of a decade. The fuel company that owned it walked away once the pumps stopped being profitable. No buyer wanted a contaminated lot with an aging structure on a road that traffic had mostly forgotten. The local authorities listed it as a derelict property, the kind of place that sells for almost nothing because the cost of fixing it is far higher than the land is worth. That is how a building, even a broken one, ends up with a price tag of $400. The number is not generosity. It is the price of a problem nobody wants. Nobody except him. To understand why a man with no home of his own wanted to take on the most demanding responsibility of his life, you have to go back 3 years to when the world had decided he was not worth any responsibility at all. He does not dress it up when he talks about it. He had a job, and then he did not. He had an apartment, and then he did not. The fall happened faster than most people imagine it can. There was no single dramatic disaster, just a job ending, savings thinner than they looked, a couple of months of rent he could not make, and a landlord with a business to run. He has said the part that haunts him most was not losing the apartment. It was how quickly the people around him started treating him differently once he had. The same neighbors who used to make small talk learned to look at a point just past his shoulder. He spent his nights in homeless shelters when there was room, and in his car when there was not. He learned which parking lots a person could sleep in without being moved along. He learned which gas stations would let him use a bathroom without a word. He learned that being homeless is not one big hardship. It is 1,000 small ones, stacked on top of each other. And he learned what it does to a person to be treated every single day as a problem to be managed instead of a man to be known. And during those years sleeping rough, he started noticing the dogs. There were always stray dogs around the places where homeless people gathered, thin dogs with no collars, moving between dumpsters behind shuttered restaurants, flinching whenever a person got too close. Most people stepped around those strays, the same way most people had learned to step around him. He noticed that. He noticed it a lot. So he started saving part of whatever food he had, a scrap of bread, a piece of meat left quietly on the curb for whatever animal was brave enough to come and take it. He could not afford to feed a stray dog. He did it anyway. For weeks, none of them would let him near. The strays would wait until he backed away, then dart in, grab the food, and vanish into the dark. He understood that too. Trust for an animal that has been kicked is not given, it is earned in inches. Then one of those dogs stopped running. She was a scarred brown mutt with a limp, an old injury that had healed wrong. She started staying a little closer each day. Then she was sleeping a few feet from his car at night. Then she was waiting for him in the morning. He named her Daisy. He fed her before he fed himself. And for the first time in years, there was something in the world that depended on him being there, something that looked for him. He has said that Daisy did not just give him company in that parking lot. She gave him a reason to get up on the mornings when there was not one. Somewhere in those cold nights, with that brown dog asleep beside a car he also slept in, an idea took hold of him. If he ever clawed his way back to anything, he was not going to spend it only on himself. He had seen too many dogs like Daisy. He had been too much like them. The $400 came together slowly, and it came together painfully. Day labor jobs when he could get them. Recycling cans, hours of it, for a few dollars at a time. Small amounts of money saved over months, kept folded in cash, money he refused to touch no matter how cold the nights in the car got. There were stretches when spending 20 of those dollars on a cheap motel room and one real night of sleep would have been the sane human thing to do. He did not. The cash in that envelope was the only future he had, and he guarded it. When he finally had enough, he had a choice in front of him. $400 was not an apartment, but it was a deposit. A first step back toward an ordinary life. It was the obvious move for a homeless man to make. He didn't make it. He bought the abandoned gas station instead. The day he got the keys, the building was barely standing. There was no electricity running to it, no water in the pipes. The interior was full of broken glass, rusting oil drums, and a decade of dust and debris. Birds had nested in the rafters. The floor of the service bay was stained black with old motor oil. The air inside smelled like rust and standing water. A reasonable person would have stood in that doorway, understood the full scale of what they had just bought, and felt nothing but despair. He stood in that doorway and started planning where the dog pens would go. The rebuild took everything he had, and most of what he did not. He cleared the debris by hand, hauling drum after drum out into the lot, sweeping up broken glass, scrubbing concrete floors that had not been touched in years. There was nobody to help him and no money to pay anyone if there had been. It was one man, a borrowed set of tools, and a building that was actively trying to fall down around him. The leaking roof was the first real wall he hit. The leaks were bad enough that rain came straight through into the service bay, and a kennel with a leaking roof is not a shelter. It is a health hazard waiting to happen. He had never done roofing in his life, so he learned it the only way available to him. Watching repair videos on a borrowed phone in the parking lot a few minutes at a time, whenever someone let him charge it. Then he climbed up onto the roof himself and patched the worst of the damage with materials he scavenged from construction site skips and scrap yards. It was not a professional job, but it held. Every time it rained after that and the concrete floor stayed dry, that was something he had done with his own two hands. He learned to ask for help too, which for a proud man who had spent years being looked through was its own kind of difficulty. He walked into hardware stores and asked for their damaged stock, the bent fence panels and dented sheet metal they could not put on a shelf. Some of them told him no, but more than a few, once they heard what the materials were actually for, handed them over for nothing. A man building a dog shelter out of a ruined gas station turns out to be a hard story to say no to. The old service bay, the part of the gas station where mechanics once worked on engines, became the main kennel. He divided it into pens using wire fencing and reclaimed wood, building each enclosure himself, measuring and cutting and hammering until his hands cracked and bled. The small office where attendants once sold cigarettes and lottery tickets became a feeding and storage room. The concrete lot out front, the same lot that had been choked with weeds, slowly became a fenced exercise yard where a dog could run without fear. And this is the part he still does not say out loud easily. The man rebuilding a shelter for homeless dogs was, in the most literal sense, still homeless himself. He slept inside that gas station while he worked on it, on the floor, in the cold, listening to a patched roof he was not certain would hold. He had not rescued himself. He had simply found a project he believed in more than his own comfort and moved into it. Then the dogs started arriving, and once that started, it did not stop. The first dogs were the strays he already knew from the street, the survivors of those years, and at the front of them was Daisy. Then word began to move through the surrounding area that there was a place, an actual place, that would take in a dog nobody else would. And word like that, once it starts, travels in every direction at once. People started coming to the edge of the gas station lot. Some of them came openly. They knocked. They explained, often ashamed, that they could not afford their dog anymore, that they were losing their own home, that they had run out of road, and had heard that the man at the gas station would not turn them away. He did not turn them away. He, of all people, was not going to lecture someone about running out of options. Others did not knock at all. He would walk out into the lot at first light and find a cardboard box set against the fence with a litter of puppies inside, breathing, waiting. He would find a full-grown tom jaw tied to the old gas station sign with a length of rope and no note at all. People left their animals there in the dark precisely because they trusted, in a way they could not admit in daylight, that the man inside would take them in rather than turn them loose. 5 dogs, then 12, then 20. The shelter was filling faster than one man with no budget could safely manage. And that, exactly that, was the danger nobody saw coming. Because the more dogs you pack into a row of homemade kennels, the more catastrophic a single piece of bad luck becomes. If a story about an ordinary person quietly doing something extraordinary is the kind of thing you want more of, subscribe. This channel covers stories like this every week. Now, back to the gas station and the winter that almost ended everything. That piece of bad luck arrived in the middle of winter. It is the night this whole story has been building toward. It started small. One puppy who wouldn't eat. He noticed, the way he noticed everything in that building, but a puppy off its food for a day is not yet an emergency. By the next morning, the puppy was visibly worse, listless and shaking on the concrete, and by the morning after that, 3 more dogs in the same row had stopped eating. He knew the signs before the veterinarian said the word. Parvo, in a clean, modern animal shelter with isolation wards and trained staff, parvo is a serious illness. In a crowded kennel built from salvaged fencing with no quarantine space and no money, parvo is not an illness. It is a wildfire. It moves from pin to pin through a building like that, and it can kill an entire shelter's worth of dogs inside a single week. He had no isolation ward. He had no budget for the round-the-clock veterinary care those dogs needed. What he had was the cold concrete floor of a former gas station and a flat refusal to lose them. So he built a quarantine room overnight out of the old office. He scrubbed every surface in the building with bleach until his hands split open at the knuckles. He moved the sick dogs in and the healthy dogs as far away as that small building would allow. For 3 straight nights, he did not sleep at all. He sat on that concrete floor between the pins, dosing fluids into puppies too weak to lift their heads, checking each dog for the next set of symptoms, cleaning, disinfecting, and starting over. The local vet came out when he could and worked at a loss because the vet could see exactly what one man was trying to hold back with his bare hands. There was a stretch in the worst of those nights when he was certain that he was going to walk the row of pins at sunrise and find that everything he had built, every dog he had promised, had died in the dark while he sat there unable to stop it. He lost two of them, two small graves dug into the frozen ground behind the gas station, but the rest of the sick dogs he pulled through. The wildfire did not spread to the healthy rows. The shelter survived, barely. He came out the other side of that winter more broke, more exhausted, and more alone than at any point since the day he had lost his apartment. The parvo outbreak had taught him something with brutal clarity. The shelter, exactly as it stood, could not survive another hit like that. One more stroke of bad luck and it was finished. He knew it, and he had no idea what to do about it. What he didn't know was that the answer was already on its way, and it would arrive from the last direction he ever would have looked, because for all of this, for the rebuild and the rescues and the outbreak, almost nobody knew the gas station shelter existed. It sat out on that quiet highway, doing its quiet work, running on one man's stubbornness and not much else. He wasn't hiding it. He simply had neither the time nor the first idea how to tell anyone about it. That changed because of a neighbor. Someone living in the area had been watching the transformation happen, slowly, month after month. They had watched a condemned building grow fresh fencing and a yard full of running dogs. They had watched a man haul water and food through every kind of weather, completely alone. And one day, without telling him, that neighbor filmed it. Just a short, honest video on a phone. The building, the dogs, the man, and a few plain sentences about what he had done and what it had cost him. They posted the video online with no real expectation that anyone would care. That video found the right people, and then it found everyone. Within days, the story of the homeless man and his $400 gas station dog shelter was being shared tens of thousands of times, then hundreds of thousands. And the response was not just sympathy, the cheap kind that costs nothing. It was action. Donations started arriving, most of them small, from ordinary people who simply could not stand the thought of this man carrying it all alone through one more winter. A pet food company reached out and set up regular deliveries to the shelter. Volunteers from towns he had never even visited started driving out on weekends to clean pens, walk dogs, and finish the 100 small repairs he had never had the time or the money to reach. For a man who had spent years being invisible, who had grown used to people looking at a point past his shoulder, it was almost too much to take in. He had never asked for any of it. He had just been doing the thing he believed needed doing, in the dark, and the world had finally turned around and seen him doing it. The donations did what one man never could have done alone. The gas station finally got reliable electricity. It finally got running water in the pipes. The pens, built from bent salvage and scrap wood, were rebuilt properly and safely with materials actually meant for the job. And he built the one thing the parvo outbreak had taught him he could not live without: a proper isolation room and a real veterinary fund set aside, so that the next sick dog that came through that door would never again be a death sentence for every other dog in the building. And here is the detail that tells you everything about the kind of man this is. With the shelter finally secure, with donations coming in and volunteers helping and the pressure off for the first time in years, he still did not spend any of it on himself first. He put the dogs ahead of his own comfort, the same way he had on the street when he fed Daisy before he ate. That instinct didn't appear because he finally had enough. It had been there the whole time, back when he had nothing at all. Some of those 30 dogs have already found families. People who saw the story online drove out to that highway gas station specifically to adopt one of his rescues. One of the clearest examples was an older couple who had recently lost a dog of many years and were not sure they were ready for another one. They drove out meaning only to look, and they left with one of the dogs that had survived the parvo winter, one of the puppies he had dosed fluids into at 3 in the morning, certain he was going to lose her. He says that watching that particular dog walk out to a warm car and a real home was the moment the whole brutal winter finally felt like it had been worth something. Every adoption is bittersweet for him. Everyone is a goodbye to an animal he personally pulled back from nothing. But that goodbye is also the entire point of the place. Every dog that leaves for a real home means an empty pen, and an empty pen means room for the next dog tied to his fence in the dark. And Daisy, the scarred brown mutt who followed him through all of it, the very first creature who ever depended on him, the dog who waited for him on the mornings he had no other reason to get up. She never went up for adoption, not once. She still sleeps a few feet from where he sleeps, the same arrangement they had beside a car in a parking lot, just with a solid roof over it now. Some debts you do not repay by letting go. The shelter still stands on that forgotten stretch of highway. The old pump signs are still standing out front, left up on purpose, a reminder of what the building used to be and what everyone had assumed it would always be. But step past those faded signs now, and you find clean pins, full water bowls, a yard of wagging tails, and 30 dogs that are alive for one single reason. A man who had nothing refused to believe that nothing was the end of the story. He still talks about those years on the street without flinching. He says they taught him one thing he can never unlearn, that the worth of a life has nothing to do with whether anyone has decided to want it. He was discarded once, written off as a problem on a road that people had forgotten. So was every single dog behind him. And he took a $400 ruin and turned it into living proof that the discarded, given even the smallest chance, can build something the rest of us drive straight past without ever slowing down. If this story moved you, take a moment to think about the strays in your own town, the animal shelters running on empty, the people and the animals that everyone has quietly agreed to step around. The man in this story did not wait until he had money or a home or anyone's permission. He just started with $400 and a refusal to look away. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one, the kind of stories about people who quietly do the things the rest of the world will not. There are more of them out there than you would think. They are worth knowing about.